1. Several years ago, a friend and I went on a multi-day hiking trip during winter. While preparing for the trip, I found a forum dedicated to the trail we'd be hiking, and several threads about people going missing on it. Most of the members blamed the hikers themselves, saying they were most likely inexperienced would-be adventurers who had went off trail and gotten lost. There was one old man on the forum who claimed he'd completed the trail once a year for the past 50 or so years, and he believed there was something more sinister behind these disappearances. Naturally, the other members laughed at him. We set off before sunrise to get as many miles in as possible for the first day. The entire first day, we only met one other person, a friendly, middle-aged man who lived somewhat locally. He seemed impressed that we were taking on a trail in winter and even invited us to camp near his property, but we declined and pressed on. That night, we were surprised by some pretty dangerous terrain around the edge of the lake and took the decision to sleep in our bivy sacks under an overhanging rock. Not exactly ideal camping conditions, but given the potential hazards, we felt this was the smartest choice. I don't sleep well at the best of times in a bivy sack, and if you've ever been zipped into one, you'll know how claustrophobic it can feel. The rock hanging over my head didn't help either. A few hours after I did eventually manage to fall asleep, I woke suddenly to the sound of my friend shouting and swearing at me. I popped my head out of my bivvy and saw that he was still zipped inside his, had somehow gotten off the relatively level ground we had been sleeping on, and was slowly sliding down towards the lake. I quickly got up and dragged him, with great effort, back up to the level ground. He was absolutely furious with me, claiming he'd felt me drag him, but soon calmed down and accepted that he'd most likely rolled over repeatedly in his sleep. We didn't go back to sleep and instead had some coffee and breakfast while waiting for the sun to come up. When we did set off, it started to rain heavily and didn't stop for most of the day. I was also having some trouble with an old injury in my leg, which slowed us down considerably. The sun seemed to disappear rather suddenly near the top of a deceptively steep hill, so we set up camp there and then, this time in a tent. After the rough couple of days we were grateful to be inside the tent, and the ground underneath was actually not too bad. We talked and joked about the trip so far, and for some reason I remember my friend expressing his disappointment that he'd forgotten to pack his iPad. And then we tried to sleep. Soon after, I began to hear what sounded like human footsteps. I thought to myself, surely there isn't someone else out here climbing this hill at night. The sound continued, and the more intently I listened, the more I became certain of what I was hearing. I poked my head out of the tent, and the sound stopped. I got out to pee and looked around, not a soul in sight. Shortly after getting back into my sleeping bag, the footsteps started again, and this time they started circling our tent. By this point, I was pretty frightened, and I asked my friend, "Are you hearing this?" He responded, "Yes, I fucking am." Knowing that he'd been hearing them the entire time and sounded as freaked out as I did, genuinely terrified me. We got out of the tent again and asked if anyone was there. But again, there was no one around, and the sound had stopped instantly. The footsteps around the tent continued for quite some time, and we didn't sleep. As soon as the sun came up, we packed up our things, got off the trail and hiked to the nearest village, got a cab to the nearest town, and made our way home. We have never been able to find a convincing explanation of what could have been causing the sound of the footsteps that night, and my friend has since become a full-fledged missing person, paranormal, and conspiracy enthusiast. 2. This may not be exceptionally scary to adults, but to 5th grade me, years ago, this encounter was terrifying. I'll include some background for context because that's usually my favorite part of stories. Anyway, my hometown grew in population steadily since its founding in 1889. It's a city wedged between a college town and the state capital, and a major interstate cutting through. So naturally, the city has grown busy. With cheap living, beautiful parks, great schools, it's an ideal place to settle down and have children or enjoy a quiet life, if that's what you desire. The high school was overgrown before I was born in '99, so they built an even bigger high school in '68, followed by 2 more high schools on the west and south sides of town in '88 and '08. The old high school still stands, and people or businesses can rent out the classrooms. I've seen restaurants, office spaces, and studios come and go there. One business was an artist who held her studio and classes out of several of the rooms. After exhibiting an interest in art, I told my mom I wanted to take some classes, and she enrolled me at her studio there. I'd never been to the building before. It was old, but I liked it. My art teacher delighted me. I took some private classes there in 5th grade. I enjoyed my teacher a lot, and we had great conversations. I was one of her older students, and we often chatted about life and outside interests while we both worked. Her name was Mindy. I trusted Mindy. We would talk about anything and everything. I must have asked if she believed in the paranormal, a childhood interest of mine, because it wasn't long after she told me the schoolhouse spirit visitors. We spoke of that frequently. One day I noticed a to-do list she had posted to one of the walls. I was snoopy and read it. One of the lines said, "Clean out black hole." I asked her what the black hole was, and she said it was a room down the hall that was used for storage. I asked if we could go see it, because I thought it was super funny that they called it the black hole. She agreed and took me down the hall. The school was old and creaky, but never unfriendly. This room was different, though. It was pitch dark. She had no idea why there wasn't electricity in that room, and no matter what they tried, they couldn't get the lights on. Just in that room, though. Like any storage room, it was cluttered. Thrown about were desks, chairs, bookshelves, even old sinks and toilets were shoved inside. There was no light from the outside or from any bulbs in the room. Some of the windows were painted black. On other windows, the glass was broken and was replaced with wooden boards. The room was freaky. Mindy told me about the room. She told me the black hole housed the spirit of an older gentleman, one who wasn't necessarily a happy guy. She spoke to him and told him to leave us alone and would be out of there soon. In some words, the vibe was off in that room. Like I said before, the paranormal was a point of interest in my childhood for a long time. Fast forward to one of my last classes there. I'm painting an illustration on a wall Mindy had sketched out already. Mindy left me on my own that night. She was in a meeting about the space in the room right next to where I was, and she wasn't far. She told me to grab her if I needed her. I wasn't necessarily planning on needing her. So I'm painting. Not really thinking about much, just making sure my colors don't blend together. It was coming along nicely. I was painting and deep in my own thoughts. I see something down the hall in the corner of my eye. It looked like a man, but it was gray and fuzzy, almost like TV static in human form. I looked, nothing there. What scared me, though, was that he was standing in front of the black hole. I knew instantly who it was, and my first thought was, he is mean. I got chills, but it was okay. I tried to ignore it, and went back to my work. I was used to seeing things out of the corner of my eye, anyways. Could have been anything. Not even 5 minutes later, it happens again. Exact same figure. I looked through my peripherals for a minute before I finally looked at it head on. Same figure. Gone again. It is not uncommon for me to see things in the corner of my eye, and when I look it's not there anymore. But it never happens twice. Never twice with the same being. I was terrified. I'd never encountered anything like this before, and it could have been a reflection, a shadow, anything. But I can't misinterpret how my body reacted. Sheer fear. Flight or fight activated. I went and told my teacher, and she seemed upset. Not at me, but just... I don't know. She told him to go away and stop bothering me. She knew what it was, and what was bothering me. My body had chills, and the second time I saw it, I went completely cold. Like adrenaline and fear and everything mixed together was pumping through me. To this day, I know what I saw. I saw that man. I know I did. He may have been just watching. He probably was. I just don't know. Years later, she moved her studio due to safety reasons. My mom told me that. I don't know if it was just an old building and dangerous in that way, or if it was more. Anyways, I'd love your take. 3. In elementary, I went to this very small charter school in my hometown. I'm talking very small, like not even over 200 students. As a result of that, it was expected that every teacher, one per grade, knew all of their students. I was well known among the staff at my school since I was gifted, and my sister also went to that school and graduated 4 years prior to me. That meant that the teachers I had knew my interests and my friends. This is important to know because this fact comes up later in the story. Now, onto the actual story. It was around spring this time in the year 2011. I was sitting at my table in my 3rd grade class learning about something. I don't remember specifically what. At this point in the school year, I knew everybody in my grade, since it only consists of the students within this classroom. So you'd probably expect me to be shocked when I notice a girl I have never seen before sitting at the table right across the room from mine. From what I can remember, the girl had blonde hair and blue eyes. She noticed me looking at her, and in response, she smiled and waved at me. When snack time came around, I was sitting by myself eating a granola bar. Suddenly, I see the girl walking towards me. She greets me and asks if she can sit with me. Now, I was known in my class to be the quiet kid, so it wasn't like me to be social immediately with someone I don't know. But for some reason, I felt almost obligated to get to know this girl. I tell her, "Yeah, sure." And she sits down in the chair next to mine. While eating her snack, she asks me what my name is, and I answer her. She then tells me her name without me asking her. I'm going to call her Lily. We started talking about random things, as 3rd graders do, and she mentions something she wants to show me at recess. Interested, I implore her to tell me what it is, but she specifies that it's a secret. Once recess rolls around, my class heads out to the park that's right across the street from my school. I'm walking with Lily. She tells me to follow her. We get to the playground, and Lily directs me to the area behind the benches, which face toward the playground. The area was flat, accompanied by huge pine trees, so the ground was covered in pine needles. We stop at a spot, and Lily squats on the ground. "Check this out," she says as she starts brushing away the pine needles. Confused, I asked what she was doing. Lily told me that what was under the pine needles was a surprise. Once she cleared a very small area, she began digging at the dirt with her fingers. I'm even more confused at this point, but then I see it. Metal. Specifically, a metal bar buried under the dirt. I ask her what it is, and she responds with, "It's an entrance to an underground lair." Intrigued, I begin helping her excavate it. We decided to first uncover the rim, and the structure was around 7 feet long and 4 feet wide. Before we could start digging, however, our teacher called our class back in for lunch. "Let's continue this tomorrow," Lily tells me. I agree, and we both head back to the school building. When I got to the cafeteria, I sat with my friends and looked around the room for Lily. Yet, for some reason, I couldn't find her anywhere within the cafeteria. Now this is when things start getting weird, as if things weren't weird already. The only time I saw Lily was at recess, despite her being in my class. And no matter how early I was to class, she was always at the excavation site before me. I didn't really think much of it, as I was only 9 years old. Around the 3rd day or so of our little project, Lily and I decided it was a good idea to ask our teacher what the structure really was. I was convinced by her that what we were digging up was really some kind of entrance. Hell, I even drew a picture of me at the so-called entrance and showed it to Lily. But I remember very well. When we asked our teacher, however, she gave us a disappointing answer. It was an old sandbox. Regardless of our imagination being crushed, we continued to dig up the sandbox. This went on for 2 weeks, maybe even longer, until one day I went to recess and she wasn't there. I guessed that she was just sick or something, so I thought nothing of it and kept on digging without her for that day. Then the next day rolled around, and the day after that, it almost felt like she had just vanished from the face of the earth. Being worried about the whereabouts of my friend, I asked my teacher where Lily went. She had no idea who she was, despite me telling her what she looked like, and the fact that both Lily and I talked to her about the sandbox 2 weeks prior. Confused, I then asked my friends during snack time if they know anything about Lily. To my utter surprise, they too had no idea who I was talking about. For years, I was convinced that she was real because the memories I have with Lily are so vivid. It was only recently, when I told some of my friends about her, did I finally start to realize that maybe Lily wasn't real. There are 2 theories as to what Lily actually was. Either she was merely a figment of my imagination, or the one I believe in the most, she was a spirit. Think about it. How the fuck would you know about an old-ass sandbox buried in the dirt? Literally no one knew about it other than Lily and I. In fact, after Lily's disappearance, I even showed my friends the sandbox, and they were confused as to how I knew about it. That would also explain why I only saw her at recess, that she was connected to that sandbox, or maybe the school somehow. As the school used to be an old firehouse from the 40s. I have no history of hallucinations or anything of that sort. I also don't recall having imaginary friends as a child, as my imagination was very limited. What do you guys think? 4. Drevo Park is one of the many parks along the Great Miami River in our area. It used to be my favorite place because we could walk our rescue pit bull there, and it was a city park, so we were permitted to use the boat and kayak ramps. Here are the reasons why I will not go back, nor will I put my kayak on that ramp. First, we took our dog to walk in the baseball field. He was being reintroduced to new situations. People, smells, etc., due to him being in a prior stressful environment that caused him to bite when he got scared. And everything scared him at that time, so limited people were best. We walked the entire tree line down to the water, and then back to my car along the same tree line. Whenever I get out of my car, I always attach my keys to my belt due to my habit of just setting things down. Well, guess what? No keys in my belt. It was starting to get dark, so my husband immediately walks the tree line, 1, 2, 3 times, and while he is doing that, I am sitting on the ground with the pup right in front of the car. He can't find the keys, and I'm starting to make plans for a pickup. He walks to the driver's side, opens the door, lets the dog in, and I can see this look of confusion. As he closes the door, he pulls the key out of the lock. Just the car key. My keychain and other keys were gone. We looked at each other, and I'm sure the look on my face resembled the look he was wearing on his face. Side note, my gifts are clairvoyance and intuitive. As he hands me the key, my entire spirit team is screaming, "Leave now!" But I was frozen maybe 5 to 7 seconds, and it felt like something tall was standing behind me. I got cold chills, and then I hear a whisper, "Leave." I turned to see if someone was behind me, but there wasn't. My gut knew that. During this whole 30 seconds from the time he found the key to us both jumping in the car, my dog was barking and growling in the back seat. Needless to say, we got out of there fast. Here's the next story and the best part. Last March, Cincinnati had record rainfall. We decided to take my daughter to Drevo Park an hour before dusk. The temp was 45 degrees. When we started to walk down to the boat ramp, there was a hill to the left and right that rises up about 50 feet and flattens out to the wood behind. Prior to this day, I wouldn't have known how high the hill goes up due to the trees and large amount of typical Ohio brush. We could see the water had risen to the top of the hill and back about another 70 to 100 feet. We decided to go explore the top of the hill because the water had taken the brush out from the entire area. As we were walking, you could see the path that the rushing water took through the mud. We walked for 20 minutes or so, and I noticed the sun is going down. My husband and daughter were in front of me, and I say, "We're losing light, we have to turn back now." And I pivoted on my foot and turned around, stopping immediately, gasping. There stood a man less than 10 feet from me. He was old with many wrinkles. He was tall and wearing old-style colors. His jacket was blue and pants were blue. His hat looked like a thick bar with strands of hair poking out all over. He was skinny and looked emaciated and frail. He didn't move, just stood there, staring at me, with his hands to his side. A couple of seconds slowly crept by and I hear my daughter say, "Mom, Mom." I turned to see what was wrong, and when I turned back he was gone. Apparently they had been calling my name for the better part of a minute, and I didn't hear them. So what I thought was 10 seconds was a lot longer for them. So I'm freaked out and we immediately hike back, and we get to the car right as the sky loses its last bit of light. And guess what? No keys. That's when I really freaked out. There were no lights in this park at all, and the temp was dropping. There was no way we could turn around and go back in the woods to look. The car was locked, and yes, we checked the door. I called my oldest daughter and got her right out of that place. The next day, my husband took his bike and went back to look for the keys. He found the car key. He said he walked the whole area where we were at and didn't see it, but as he walked back up the boat dock at the top of the hill where the concrete meets grass, there was my key, stuck in the ground standing straight up in an area I never walked. I vowed to never return and should have kept it that way, but I didn't. 2 weeks ago, we were teaching my youngest to drive on the back road because they are less traveled. She was pretty nervous, and about 20 minutes into it, she was done. Drevo Park was on the right, so I told her to turn in and park to switch. She starts to make the turn into the parking spot, and the car lunges forward. There were woods about 8 feet from the concrete barrier at the top of the spot. I'm screaming, "Brakes! Brakes!" And I see her leg move up and down and try to brake with no avail. Then suddenly the car stops with an inch to spare, throwing all of us forward. Once it was in park, I turned to her and asked why she didn't brake, and why would she hit on the gas pulling into a parking spot. At this time she's crying, saying she was braking and that they were not working. At the time I didn't believe her, but once home I started to think about all the creepy things that happened in Drevo Park. I determined I will never go back. I will never dock out my kayak there. I'll kayak the extra 3 miles to the next pullout. What do y'all think? Haunted Park. 5. I watched a video some time ago of a skeptic explaining paranormal encounters with physics. And while I still believe in ghosts, etc., I always listen to the voice of reason before making assumptions. Here's the thing. Today I visited my dad in the house we grew up in. It was built by my great-grandpa in place of his childhood home, which means plenty of people died on this property, and the structure of the house basically isn't fresh. My sister noticed the chandeliers and told me, "Remember when we used to panic whenever those things swang?" The chandeliers are heavy, made out of 2 thick glass vases, held in a wooden block attached to the ceiling with a rope. I had a hard time remembering why they swang, pretty violently by the way. We thought they were gonna fall. Until I realized they did this by themselves. Nobody touched them, especially 2 kids with 1-digit ages left home alone, hence why we were so scared. Now I'm wondering whether they were swinging because of vibrations caused either by our running or something else. The floor above was an attic, or was it paranormal? We moved away about 10 years ago and I've never seen them swing since. The house has been renovated and little kids no longer run around there because they're now in their early 20s and stuck to the screens. It could easily be blamed on the vibrations, but I had a few other paranormal experiences in this house, hence why I'm so unsure. I saw my sister's doppelganger. Long story short, she was sitting still in a chair, didn't even breathe or acknowledge my presence. I tried to touch her, panicked, and ran to my parents' room where my actual sister was playing on the PC. Moving on to the less believable ones. I randomly got terrified of the vacuum cleaner. I felt like someone was there. My mom tried to reassure me there was nothing there, and then it moved. She said it was a coincidence. I saw an imprint of a face in a bath. My mom tried to recreate it to reassure me, but it wasn't possible. It's like an invisible entity just stuck its face in there. After moving out during a visit, I sat in the living room when the doors opened. I jokingly said, "Grandpa, stop goofing around and close the door." And they did close halfway in. The movement wasn't rapid, so it could be the vibrations, definitely not wind. I know it sounds like a huge stretch, but it's because I had to limit myself to the activity in this house, which is pretty underwhelming. Grandpa, if it's really you, please try to at least impress me. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 320. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I do believe I have a little shout out to do today. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, shout out goes to the author of the 4th story. I can talk, I promise. Shout out goes to the author of the 4th story. That's the Drevo Park story with the car keys. And that goes to Crazy Christian. Thank you very much for allowing us to use your story, Crazy Christian. All right, before we go, let's have Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, if you were gifted a very expensive haunted car, and you don't have to worry about putting gas in it, or even petrol, and it's going to be paid for you, it's maintained, you just have to drive it, but it has to be used. The caveat being, there's a ghost in the car of the previous owner. Would you want to own it, or would you get a bus pass? I gotta be honest, if the ghost's in the car anyway, maybe they could drive it for me, but given that I don't have a license, probably not. If I did have a license, maybe I'd give it a go. We'd see. Yeah, I'd try it for a while. Free car, why not? All expenses paid. But we'd see how that works out. So let me know what you think in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. I'm going to rest my voice. I'm going to talk to one of my favorite people. And there will also be food at some point as well, I assume. So until next time, thank you very much for listening. And take very good care of yourself.